Call to order the meeting of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District Board of Managers, October 7, 2021. This meeting is being convened electronically through Zoom pursuant to Minnesota Statutes 13D-021 due to the COVID-19 pandemic and my determination that it is not prudent or feasible for us to meet in our usual meeting place. This meeting has been noticed and will be conducted in accordance with the statute and all other applicable terms of the open meeting law, and all votes will be taken by roll call. Let me first of all take attendance here. Manager Hejmati.
Present.
Manager Miller.
Here.
Manager Sando.
Here.
Manager Loftus.
Here.
Manager White is here. Manager Olson.
Here.
Manager Maxwell.
Here.
Thank you. All here. Is there a member of the public here, Mr. Whisker, who might want to speak to us?
Doesn't appear so. President White, I see I might have misassigned you the name Steve Sandos. I'm going to go ahead and change that first of all. But while I'm doing that, we'll see if there are any comments from the members of the public. All the names I see, I think, are associated with the MCES permit.
I see. So let me ask, is there a member of the public who wished to address the board on a matter that's not on the agenda? Hearing no one, let's move to approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
Full approval.
Thank you, Manager Miller. Is there a second?
Second.
I'm going to take Manager Hejmati as the second. Those in, oh, whoops, sorry, roll call. Manager Maxwell.
Aye.
Manager Olson.
Aye.
Manager Loftus.
Aye.
Manager White. Manager Sando. Manager White says yes. Manager Sando. Manager Miller.
Aye.
Manager Hejmati.
Aye.
The agenda is approved. I have no report. I just note that there are upcoming meetings and events are in the schedule or printed in the agenda, and two of them are called out for Manager Hejmati and Manager Miller to attend. We can go directly to the permit, item 10.1.
Madam President, we have the consent agenda.
So we do. Thank you so much. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved with a comment on the recorded minutes from the last meeting.
Second.
Thank you, Manager Miller. What's your comment, Manager Olson?
It's very minor, but on line 125, I think we should keep the O on the end of the manager's name. And on line 126, I think we should take off the O on Manager Hejmati's name.
That's like a nice comment. With those minor tweaks,
That's very minor.
Are we going to vote on those?
let's just assume that they're done. And we will vote on the consent agenda. Manager Maxwell.
Aye.
Manager Hejmati.
Aye.
Manager Loftus.
Aye.
Manager Sando.
Aye.
Manager Olson.
Aye.
Manager Miller.
Aye.
And Manager White votes aye. Thank you for calling that to my attention, Mr. Smith. As I mentioned, Manager Hejmati and Miller do have meetings assigned to them. And so we'll look to you, Ms. Barlow, for the permit.
Thank you.
There we go.
Okay. President White, Board of Managers, good evening. This presentation is regarding permit 19553, which is the Met Council L24 lift station upgrade permit. This permit is before you for consideration as the applicant has requested a variance from the buffer provision of the district wetland protection rule. I'll provide a project overview, discuss any applicable rule analysis before discussing the variance request and then providing staff's recommendation. The project is located in Minnetrista in the western portion of the district. It's a pretty small site. The parcel is about 1/2 acre in size. And the image to the right shows where the parcel is in comparison to 6 Mile Creek and other district projects. So to the north is the 6 Mile Creek Prairie Restoration. To the south is just district-owned land. Again, the site's really small, so these images just show better scale of where this parcel is. The red dot indicates where the district currently has a carp barrier underneath the Highland Road Bridge. And the parcel itself is just off of Highway 7. As it currently exists, this 1/2 acre parcel contains the original 1970s lift station, as well as its access drive. Due to the age of the site, there are no existing stormwater BMPs or wetland buffers on this property. Any runoff that's generated on site currently enters the wetland or just leaves the site via Berlin flow, and it does so untreated. Met Council is proposing to upgrade this existing lift station in order to have an increase in capacity in conjunction with the St. Bonnie Interceptor project that is about to come online. These upgrades would allow for a larger lift station building to provide this capacity, as seen in the site plans, and a slight reconfiguration of the site, as well as a slightly larger access drive. With these updates, the site will also be brought up to OSHA compliance, specifically just different safety standards that the site needs to meet that currently they're not meeting. And the comparison of these two images just shows that there's really not a whole lot of change going on between what the lift station site currently looks like and what is proposed, just slightly bigger footprint and a slightly different configuration. The proposed project triggers three district rules, the first of which is erosion control, as there will be a site disturbance greater than 5,000 square feet, double walled silt fences, inlet protection, and a construction entrance, all highlighted in the diagram, will be provided on site in order to meet district requirements and fulfill the erosion control rule, as well as keeping sediment out of 6 Mile Creek. The next applicable district rule is wetland protection, which is also the subject of tonight's variance. The city of Minnetrista is the LGU for the Wetland Conservation Act. Any additional information regarding the WACA process can be found within the board packet. There are no proposed impacts to the wetland that extends onto the site. In the image at the left, you can see the wetland boundary outlined in red in comparison to the parcel boundary, which is outlined in yellow. The parcel is essentially surrounded by district preserve wetland. And as a result, the project would be required to establish 75-foot base buffers. The image to the right shows the overall configuration and placement of the buffers. As mentioned, the wetland protection rule is the subject of the variance, and that is because the preserved wetland that surrounds the site would require a 75-foot buffer width, base buffer width. However, on the site across all of those different configurations, the average buffer width that is achieved is only around 34 feet. And the shortfall results in a 12,000 square foot shortage in the area. It should be noted that the buffer configuration is maximized to its greatest extent possible. However, that 34 average buffer width is just what can be achieved given the parcel size. The final rule that's applicable is the district stormwater management rule, because there is a increase in impervious of about 4,000 square feet on the site. The applicant is proposing to include sand filtration and bioswales. The location of the BMPs are highlighted in yellow. The proposed stormwater management plan exceeds requirements for a site that's under an acre. Had they just put in any BMP without any specific treatment scope, because the parcel is 1/2 acre in size, that would meet our requirements. However, the combination of these BMPs is going to result in rate and phosphorus control for the site. Finally, the variance request. The applicant is requesting a variance from the buffer width requirements, as stated earlier. The site was selected by Met Council for the lift station in the 1970s, before district regulations were applicable. The site size, existing easements, and then required setbacks, all of which are just inherent conditions to the property, are making it so that 75 feet can't be achieved. Again, the current buffer configuration is maximizing all the given space on the size, but there is a shortfall. In line with our variance rule, staff analyzed different alternatives for the project, including a no-build scenario or working within that existing footprint. However, both of these were determined to not be feasible as the capacity increase would not be met. And that capacity increase is required for the project. And then also the OSHA safety standards would not be brought into compliance on the site either. Part of the caveat for that same footprint is, again, just because of the size of the site, even if they worked within the same footprint, they couldn't achieve 75 feet of buffer anyway. So they'd have to be applying for a variance no matter what. With the combination of the BMPs that are being provided on site, there's going to be a 28% greater phosphorus removal and a 4% greater total suspended solids removal than would be achieved if the site were putting strict compliance with that 75-foot buffer, which is beneficial because the downstream water body, 6 Mile Creek, is impaired for phosphorus. In summary, Met Council is proposing a capacity increase in OSHA safety upgrades to that L24 lift station. The project triggers 3 district rules: erosion control, wetland protection, stormwater management. The variance request is specifically for wetland protection. There's no public response to the variance notification, just for the board's knowledge. The half-acre site with its existing easements and setback requirements makes it so that the 75 feet required buffer width cannot be met. And Met Council is providing stormwater management that exceeds site requirements and provides greater water quality benefit than would be achieved with a 75-foot strict compliance buffer alone. Staff and district engineer believe that there is sufficient evidence for the board to consider approving the variance to the buffer section of the wetland protection rule. And staff recommend approval of permit 19553 with the following conditions: submission of a and submission of a wetland buffer planting and management plan. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Barlow. First of all, is there a motion to approve the variance for wetland protection to the buffer width requirement?
So moved, Olson.
Thank you, Manager Olson. Is there a second?
Second, Miller.
Pardon me. Thank you, Manager Miller. Are there any questions regarding the variance? Then let's go ahead and vote on that, on the variance. So to approve the variance, Manager Miller?
Aye.
Manager Olson?
Aye.
Manager Sando? Manager Sando? Manager Loftus?
Aye.
Manager Hedgemati?
Aye.
Manager Maxwell?
Aye.
And Manager White votes aye. So now let's move, pardon me, I seem to have a tickle here.
And President, did we get a vote from Manager Sando or no?
We did not get a vote from Manager Sando. That's right. Is there a motion to approve the permit with the variance and the conditions indicated by staff?
Move approval.
Manager Miller, is there a second?
Second, Maxwell.
Thank you, Manager Maxwell. Ms. Barlow, could you shut off your screen share?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Then is there any further discussion before going to vote? Very well. Manager Sando? Manager Loftus?
Aye.
Manager Maxwell?
Aye.
Manager Miller?
Aye.
Manager Olson?
Aye.
Manager Hedgemati?
Aye.
Return to you, Manager Sando. Are you muted?
I think he's having trouble with his.
It's not muted, but I'm not sure if we're getting audio.
And Manager White votes aye. So the permit is approved. Thank you very much, Ms. Barlow.
Thank you.
Are we allowed to vote with thumbs up, Mr. Smith? I know we can't. Have to be audible. We'll go then to item 11.1, which is the resolution 21065. Ms. Cermak.
All right, you guys seeing the right presentation screen?
Yes.
Great. All right, good evening, President White, Board of Managers. I'm here tonight seeking authorization to release the RFP for consultant services for the 2D pilot model build. I want to start off by providing a little bit of context on why we need a new watershed-wide model, what we want that to look like, and kind of what the obstacles are going to be in order to make that successful. And then really clearly lay out how the pilot model is going to mitigate some of that risk and really inform how we effectively scale this project watershed-wide pending the LCCMR funding that we're kind of waiting to hear on. And then I'll go through the key areas of work outlined in the RFP package and wrap up with the budget and timeline for the project. So as the board knows, we do have a current H&H watershed-wide model, XP Swim. It was designed back in the early 2000s to kind of represent our system and characterize how much water and how much pollutant is moving from A to B. So an example of that is, 1 inch falling in the upper watershed equates to about 1.5 inch water level rise on Lake Minnetonka. And so while it does that characterization of A to B well, it doesn't represent what's happening in between. So fast forward, we've been receiving a lot of rain. We experienced the wettest 7 years on record, kind of breaking those seasonal norms, increase in the intensity of the rain, and really starting to hear a lot more about different types of flooding. So not just the classic kind of overbank full flooding, but grid flooding, groundwater flooding, and seeing landlocked basins needing to be kind of pumped for the first time. And all of that is really stressing our infrastructure. And this is infrastructure that a lot of it was built, under a completely different climate regime and built under kind of a totally different landscape. And so with all of that, staff and the board, the public has been asking a lot of new questions that have really kind of pushed the limits of our model, and we've been unable to answer them. And really what we identified is we can't answer those questions because we don't have that clear understanding of what's happening between A and B. We need to understand not only how much water is coming off the landscape, but we need to understand how it's moving through the landscape. And really what's limiting our current model in that is its resolution. We don't have that in between kind of fully built out. And so you might be asking, well, why didn't we include that level of kind of granularity in the original XP Swim model? And really that was a common constraint of all models of its time. We were limited by the availability of these geographic data sets and the resolution of those data sets. So LIDAR, soils, land use, along with computing power. So when we're asking a scenario about the entire upper watershed and the impact on Lake Minnetonka, if we had every pipe and wetland included in our model representation, a run like that would take days to kind of get an answer out. So it just wasn't feasible to kind of keep that level of complexity in a model of that scale. But luckily, technology has come a long way in 20 years, and it now makes operating and maintaining a model that is high resolution and large scale actually possible. And so what we want that to look like is, build out this in between. We want to know, how is the water making its way from A to B? Is it traveling through a network of pipes underground? Is it making its way through a system of wetlands, ponds, specific BMPs that the district has implemented? And how is groundwater interacting with that surface water? So if we can build that granular level understanding of how water is moving through our system, we'll be able to kind of communicate how climate change is impacting our system now, predict how it's going to continue to impact our system under kind of future climate scenarios, and be able to evaluate different strategies and projects within the system. And so I identified that now technology makes it possible to maintain and operate a model, but we've identified kind of two key things that are really going to kind of make or break the success of that watershed-wide model. One of those being the need to have repeatable automated workflows to maintain the model. And what I mean by that is we have 29 different kind of communities within the watershed, all with their own unique degree of stormwater data sets, and they're all stored in a different format. And we need to be able to create a process that can take all of that data, put it in the correct format for our model, so that on a repeatable, routine basis, we can update our model and it doesn't sit static kind of on a shelf like our current XP Swim model. Secondly, we need to make sure we're utilizing a modeling software that supports the questions we're trying to answer. There are plenty of 2D surface water model softwares on the market. And so we need to make sure that we're utilizing the right one. So with both of these elements being really critical to the success of our watershed-wide model, there is a lot of risk associated with this step. And that is why staff and the board decided to pursue the pilot model build. And really what we're trying to do through the pilot model is, not create a small scale model to actually do climate adaptation planning. We're really trying to build out a process that we can utilize and learn from to scale up to the watershed-wide build. And so through this project, we have kind of three key objectives that we want to come out the other side with. We want to have working examples of those automated workflows. We want to be able to understand the benefits and drawbacks of each software. And I had mentioned, that there's a lot of 2D modeling softwares out there, and we have spent the last year working with an internal team, doing lit reviews, tracking with outside consultants on narrowing that list of models. And we have it narrowed down to two that we think are going to be really well suited to the district's needs. So being able to track the benefits and drawbacks of each of those two tested softwares so that ultimately we can come out the other side with an informed decision on which one is most effective to scale watershed-wide. And so to ensure that we can deliver on those deliverables, we've put a lot of thought into kind of what areas of work we want included in the RFP, what those deliverables look like. So I'm going to tick through those really fast, just at a high level of what those entail. So right off the bat, we're asking the consultant to work with us to develop an evaluation framework. One of our really important objectives is making an informed decision on which software will scale. And so we want to make sure that from the very beginning, we're tracking all the right metrics, looking at the right things, and then also working with them to figure out how we can actually apply that framework throughout the whole process. Secondly, it's really starting to get into that nitty-gritty of looking at the data sets we have in the city of Edina, the Turbid-Lunston corridor, seeing where they're starting from and kind of where they need to get to go into these two models, and really working to develop the scripts to make that happen. Getting into the actual model build is where we kind of test out the functionality of those workflows that they generated. How easy was it to build those models, what kinks did we run into, how much manual entry was still required. And then it's an opportunity to utilize the district's data, the city of Edina's data, to calibrate and validate these models to see which one is really representing our system the most accurately. Once we have two functioning working models, we have selected a subset of scenarios to run through these models. And just like the pilot project, we are less concerned about the output of those model runs and more concerned about the process of actually running a scenario. So the ease and the functionality of changing those model inputs, I'm tracking that to inform, are we going to be able to utilize this model in the future as much as we want to? And then lastly, wrapping up, kind of the scope of work will be, kind of a final report summarizing the output of all these different work elements and kind of leading us to making that kind of final decision to bring forward to the board. So in recap, we went through tonight why we need a new watershed-wide model, what we want that model to look like, and kind of what are the essential features in order to make that happen. And then, stressing that the pilot model is really about mitigating risk for the watershed-wide model build. And through that, we want to develop the automated workflows, evaluate the two softwares, and ultimately make a decision. And we're going to be able to do that through the scope of work that you see in the RFP package tonight. So lastly, project budget and timeline. We have budgeted in the 2021 funds $242,100 for the project. Our plan is to release the RFP tomorrow, by end of day, with proposals due back in just under a month on November 4th, and then work with the cross-departmental team along with a member from the city of Edina to interview the consultants, and anticipated to bring our recommendation forward to the board at the December 2nd meeting. We do know that it's a really tight turnaround time from proposal submittal to the board recommendation. We are still going to push for that date, and we'll just see if we can make that date. Otherwise, the second meeting in December. So with that, staff recommends approving resolution 21065, authorizing us to release the RFP for the 2D pilot model build. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Cermak. Great report. Is there a motion to adopt resolution 21065?
Move approval, Miller.
Thank you, Manager Miller. Is there a second?
Second, Olson.
Thank you, Manager Olson. Does anyone have questions for Ms. Cermak?
I do, Olson.
Go ahead.
Now, in this draft that I read through, we show what they say part 2 scope of services. The consultant work closely with the district to complete tasks 1 through 7 with a project budget of 242,100. Are we telling them that's the final number, or are we saying do your best within that number?
President White, Manager Olson, we did decide to kind of put the budgeted amount for the project in the RFP with the idea that we would hopefully get kind of more proposals kind of in the range that we have budgeted for.
Okay.
We are anticipating that some might come in above that, and we might have to kind of look at in their budget line items, kind of why that is. And we feel pretty confident in the number that we've budgeted for the project. We've really done our due diligence on the front end of kind of scoping out what this would take throughout the way. So hopefully we'll be able to get a lot of proposals within that dollar amount.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Manager Olson. Is there another question?
Maxwell has one.
Go ahead.
How difficult is it going to be to get all the 27 cities involved?
Manager Maxwell, very good question. So through the pilot, of course, we're just working with the city of Edina and then getting some, small bit of infrastructure data from Laketown Township. And of course, Edina is, fully on board. We have the MOU established, but we're well aware that a big part of the success of this watershed-wide model is the buy-in from our partners in the municipalities. And so we're going to be, I think, tying in with the process that Becky and Kate are leading with kind of the climate work and building a coalition of all the policymakers, kind of timing the completion of the pilot with the rollout of the watershed-wide kind of kickoff in hopes to really communicate what we're trying to do, kind of what we're going to need from each city, and set expectations kind of from the get-go. But
And then
it's
ma-
definitely something, yeah, we're thinking about for sure.
And then maybe a follow-up question that once it's completed, are we gonna share, is it gonna be one gigantic from all 27 cities, or is it gonna be broken down city by city and how the plan works? Or is it just gonna be from A to point B,
Yeah,
or is each city gonna be separately?
Manager Maxwell, I don't think each city will be separate. You know, it's just going to follow more of kind of the hydrologic boundaries. I don't know for sure yet, depending on the modeling software we choose, and some other metrics, we may decide to break it up into upper, lower, have two portions in Minnehaha. It's going to be more based on kind of computing power and kind of typical model runs that we're going to do with it. If that
The
answers.
last question was, and then, so once we do like upper, and lower, how do we convince the people to buy into it from the different cities? Just by the
So-
data?
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, we're really now, even though it's not kind of a primary objective of the pilot, we're already testing some of that out by having Edina involved. So working with their water resource staff, their district engineer, figuring out how do the outputs from our modeling tool differ from a municipal model? How can we make sure that what we're gaining from this tool is going to be seen as value from our cities? So we're kind of starting to test that relationship out now, and I think we're going to learn a lot kind of as we go through.
Thank you.
Thank you, Manager Maxwell. Are there any other questions? Manager Miller, go ahead.
It seems to me that most of these cities, at least, they got some pressure to have some evidence of addressing global climate change. And I think they'd be anxious to participate so they can have sophisticated information to present to their constituents that they are addressing the impacts of global warming. So I think it's going to be a lot easier than just dealing with city engineers from one city to the next, and if they're interested or not. I think there's going to be a lot of interest, even at the county level, at the policymaker level down. I think we're going to find eventually great cooperation.
Thank you, Manager Miller. Other questions or comments?
This is
Manager
a little-
Hajmani, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, thank you. I have a number of questions, so you can cut me off anytime you want to make sure that other people ask questions too, Sherry.
I don't think we're going to run till midnight, so I think you're pretty much open there.
Okay, all right.
Thanks for the warning, though.
Yeah. I'll go get
Yes,
some
please interrupt
coffee.
me. Yeah, please interrupt me because I have a number of different questions.
Thank you.
I wondered if Kaylee, if you and your team had talked to any of the people who presented the 2D models at the last MOD meeting. There were a number of presentations where people had applied the 2D models, and I wondered if there's anything we could learn from them, or is that not, is that what they presented not relevant to us?
Manager Hajmani, I can't necessarily speak to exactly which presentations you're talking about, but just as an example, City of Edina has built out part of their city in a 2D software. So we are kind of, learning from them in that aspect and kind of taking their lessons learned as we roll out ours. I don't know if anyone else has any more context about the MOD presentation specifically, but.
Yeah, I can speak to it briefly. And then we'll let Manager Hajmati pick up where he left off. It sounds like he's got a scroll he wants to work through. So I think the MOD presentation Arun, was from the city of Minneapolis,
Okay.
GIS-based 2D modeling, and we have been quite engaged with the city of Minneapolis, received a letter of support from them, their surface water and sewer director. And I think to pick off where Manager Miller left off, I think at a policy level and public planning level, there's going to be enthusiastic support for this work. And we've seen that from regional
Yes.
partners like Metropolitan Council, EQB, Hennepin County, have all supported and endorsed this as a great scope of work for the district, or a space for us to occupy as a broker of this regional water budget information. I think the reason the pilot build and the initial rollout of the watershed-wide model of building is going to be focused on engineering is because the public works departments are the gatekeepers of storm sewer information. And as Kaylee pointed out, one of the risk points, or one of the things that needs solving, one of the nuts that needs cracking that nobody's done yet, and why people are so interested and supportive of this, is how do you normalize the storm sewer data, which Metro GIS Coalition is working on, but more importantly, how do you create automated data pipelines that can script and scrape that data and put it into the model? So I think what's going to be really interesting about this project is very technically dense, complex, difficult to explain, but we're also going to have to engage on multiple levels. To build a project, there's going to be a heavy technical level of engagement, but we know that municipal planners and policymakers are very much interested in the outputs of the work. So that's why we've seen such broad support from both the Creek, Lake communities, and then these regional partners for the LCCMR ask.
Okay, thank you, James. Thank you. Are there consultants who have the required skills to do this? Whom we can send the RFP to?
Yeah, great question, Manager Hejmani. We realize that a lot of consultants maybe don't have experience, in both modeling engines. That's why we've been targeting kind of national consultants that are likely to have exposure in at least building out both these software engines. So we're feeling confident that we will get a decent amount of proposals with the right amount of experience.
Okay. All right. How will the machine learning model that you folks have developed mesh with this model?
Another great question. So the machine learning model is really designed for those short-term flood forecasting predictions in the creek itself. So wherever we have resonance stations, we can use machine learning to kind of take the forecast and predict how the creek level or the few lake sites we have, how that water level is going to respond. And we can do that, essentially in real time. What we don't know quite yet is how we're going to be able to use this new modeling tool in short-term flood forecasting. That's something we're going to be testing out. But of course, what this 2D modeling tool can do is inform on flooding beyond just inside the creek channel. So looking at, grid flooding and surface flooding kind of further away from the creek. If that helps answer that one.
Okay. It must be, so what you're saying is that this will give input as to, sort of the detailed input on specific places from which the water feeds into the, into the creek, and will give specific input and what I'm, and I'm wondering how will that be incorporated into the machine model that we've had, or how will that, how we work with those two together? Because these seem to be like two separate things.
Sure, I can try to explain it maybe in a different way, and then someone else.
Yeah, maybe I don't understand it. Thank you so much.
So we have our ResNet kind of continuous real-time sensors, and those are kind of supporting both model types. They're supporting our 2D watershed-wide modeling effort by being a great source of model calibration and model validation. They also can feed into our machine learning models to give us essentially near real-time predictions. So we look at the forecast, we can hit run on our machine learning model, and at any of those ResNet station locations, we can look at the predicted water level value, and that's purely in channel. So we see them, kind of working side by side, but the machine learning model is much so focused on like very short-term
Right.
flood predictions, with the modeling 2D modeling tool being more geared towards kind of long scenario, flood scenario runs. Someone else can jump in if you disagree, but that's how I kind of would explain the two working together.
Okay. So we
President
look at
White. Yeah, President
Yes,
White, Manager
Go ahead,
Hidmati.
Chris.
Both of these, because I'm a nerd and I like models, both of these models will work hand in hand. They're actually complementary to each other.
That's what I
Kaylee did
thought.
a great job. We'll understand through the machine learning how we can interact with the creek and then how we can also interact with the lake as far as management of both of those assets. But then what also this model will do is also help with the long-term impacts that come along with that. So the 2D modeling will help us understand, say we're in March or April, and we understand what we have for snowpack, and we also understand what we have for upcoming forecasts. So you've heard Tiffany and James talk about precipitation forecasts. These will work hand in hand to help complement how that'll work on a watershed scale versus just, say, Lake Minnetonka. And then as we become smarter and have more experience with different data points, it'll help us better refine and dial in and understand the range of operation components we can put forward to help our partners manage their components along the creek and then also within their storm sewer network. So it's really a great complement to both of them. It'll help really the district help manage the water within the district as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay. I'm gonna take a different tack now. How will we know, Kaylee, when we work with these consultants? I mean, this is a fairly daunting task that I'm seeing ahead, and maybe I'm overwhelmed by it as I listen to this, because I'm also interested in modeling and I've done modeling in the past, and so I know something about it. So this sounds like a fairly daunting task. Are we going to evaluate these folks as we go along, kind of seeing, like when we do designs, we do 30% design and 60% design. Are we going to be monitoring them as we go along to see if they're really doing for us what we need?
Yeah, Manager Hidmati, I think we're really going to incorporate that into kind of this task one of the evaluation framework. It's establishing how we want the consultant to kind of track the process, but it's also giving us really nice, breakpoints and deliverables and what we're looking for.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay. Got it. Okay. So the evaluation framework itself will be those kinds of checks that let us know what's working and when it's working. Okay. Good. All right. Will these folks who we'll be contracting with, will they be useful to us as we go, as we start applying the pilot model to the area-wide model? Will we be needing them? Will we, what's your thought of how that process will work and how that will interact with the RFP and these folks?
Yeah, Manager Hidmati, we've definitely communicated, in the RFP that a watershed-wide build is coming. And so that very well might attract, more attention to this project, knowing that there is potential for more work. We're by no means, tying ourselves to the consultant we choose for this pilot project to the watershed-wide build, but not ruling it out either, I guess. It would follow a very
Okay.
similar RFP work. The timeline of when we kick off the kind of watershed-wide work will probably be slightly ahead of kind of this project wrapping up, because a lot of the beginning work is that coalition building, kind of meeting with partners. So I'm not exactly sure on quite the timeline of when we'll be, coming to release that watershed-wide RFP, but yeah, does that answer that? I think, hopefully.
Yeah, I got a sense of how
Okay.
you work with that. Okay, all right. I'm noticing that you're applying one model to, you're using one of, there are two models to select. One model is being applied for the urban and one for the rural. Is there any way of making sure, if we switch, like use the other model for the urban model, the one we use for the urban, if we apply it to the rural, or the other way around, how are we going to make sure that it works?
Yeah, Manager Hejmati, actually both softwares are going to be built in both geographies.
Okay.
And so I'll give the RFP another read and just make sure that comes across really
Okay.
clear, if that's how you
Okay.
interpreted it.
I mean, I read the RFP, but I was a little snowed by the technical details. So okay, all right, okay, all right. And then I'm going to ask a question, not just to you, Kaylee, but I'm going to ask a question to the managers. This project is going to have the outcome of this project, and the outcome of where we're going is going to have a big impact on what we do over the next 5, 10, 15 years, and the kind of policies we put in place. And I'm wondering whether there needs to be board liaisons involved, working with our staff, so that both we as the board can be updated, and board input from a policy level can also be incorporated into what's happening. So I'm asking this question to all my fellow board members. Do you think it's worth doing that?
Does anyone want to respond to Manager Hejmati?
I've never given it any thought, but it's one that we should examine before we decide to do it. Maybe we should have James think about that and bring back a suggestion to the board for discussion. Because I think it's going to require a lot more technical understanding than I possess, and probably some time. And
Yeah,
make sure it's a clear understanding of that we're liaison from the board. We're not running the project,
Right.
and we're and make sure that we focus on the policy elements rather than the operational things that would be staff prerogatives.
Yeah. Like Bill has a lot of technical knowledge.
Yeah, for sure.
area.
Like the nomination.
Just-
Nomination.
One of the questions, though, when you have a system like this that's hard to develop, finally gets developed, works well in a watershed-wide application, how do we offer it to other watersheds? Do we copyright? Do we patent? I mean, I've never been in a situation where we could have an asset that other people could benefit from. So any thoughts on that if our council's online here?
Might be a question for Brian first, Louis, is my thought, because it's one that has come up a number of times, and it's not the model itself, it's not the model outputs that's going to be replicable or scalable, because this will be our model. It's the process of making this work, of automating the storm sewer data, the type of model that we're using, and how to actually build it at scale. That is the innovative component where the risk lies, and that is the nut to crack. And that is such a significant, daunting scope of work. And it's why, to this point, the board has seen fit to say we should build a prototype. We should do a pilot at a small municipal scale, which is a significant investment of time and effort in and of itself before we take the big risk with the LCCMR funding of scaling this up. And all of that, for all of those reasons, I think that's why it's caught the attention of all of our partners. It's filling a big need and void in the marketplace of understanding the water budget, and nobody's tackled it yet at that level. So you won't be able to pick the model up and license it, so to speak, to another watershed. It's the process of developing it, which is where the value is. And that's been a hard thing to explain to folks like the LCCMR as well, who are interested in, if we make state investment, how is this repeatable? How does this scale? Because it's not the outputs, like a lot of work that they fund develop statewide inventories that everybody can benefit from. This will provide immediate benefit to us. That doesn't just lift up and is immediately replicable in 9 Mile because they have a different topography, different storm sewer grid. So it's the process of how to do this work, which nobody's figured out, which is the value and the cost and the risk. But Louis may have a kind of a follow-up legal perspective on your licensing question.
I'm going to interrupt here for a moment. Kaylee, could you stop screen sharing? Thank you. Louis, go ahead.
Madam President, Manager Olson, the only thing I would say to add is typically what you see is when one government entity invests in building a system software and has data that other entities are interested in, and you have issues about sharing it in the tax base that funded it. And generally, we develop license agreements where the other party agrees that they'll use the data. And if they sometimes will agree to contribute more data back to help calibrate and refine it. But as Mr. Whisker pointed out here, the universe of interest in the 2D model within our watershed is within our watershed. And then what we're relating beyond that is the learning of the process. And I guess we'll have to go through it and discover what ways there are to share it and what we want to protect in that process or have understandings about as conditions of sharing. But it may well be that it's the kind of learning process that whoever does this is going to market themselves to other settings. So that might be one of the other realities.
Thank you. Any other thoughts for discussion before we vote? All right, then voting on resolution 21065, Manager Hitchmati.
Aye.
Manager Olson.
Aye.
Manager Miller.
He's muted.
Aye.
Manager Maxwell. You're muted as well, Gene.
Aye.
Thank you. Manager Loftus,
Aye.
Manager Sando,
Aye.
and Manager White votes aye. Thank you very much, Ms. Cermak. Just reading the detail in the report was a hint or a shadow of how complicated this project is. So thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's daunting. It's a daunting project. I wish you all the
Exciting.
best.
Exciting.
We're
Okay.
excited to kick it off.
Yeah. this is-
Then all we have left on our agenda is the administrator's report. Mr. Whisker.
Yes, thank you, President White, managers. Got a few items for you this evening, and I wanted to start with, I'm just having a difficult time with my screens for some reason. I wanted to start with a brief update regarding the delinquency of mortgage payments for the 5 acres of property the district conveyed to the shoppers in 2013. This should be an issue that you're relatively familiar with. We had closed session discussion in February, more recent communication in June from council at Dorsey. In generally, at that point in time, it was communicated to you that the shoppers had executed a purchase agreement for the property. And I think it's safe to say that it had the potential to fully pay out the lien holders at closing. I just wanted to let you know that since June, staff and real estate counsel and general counsel at Smith Partners have spoken with the seller's broker / attorney 1 to 2 times per month. The closing has continued to be pushed out several times. But along the way, the prospective buyers have made some investments in the property. They've also been profiled, I think, as President White informed me, as the new owners of the orchard in a local magazine. But closing hasn't happened. So I just wanted to let you know that's where we stand. We're essentially remaining in a holding pattern, awaiting that closing, with the sellers and their attorney fully aware of the payout requirements at time of closing. And we're going to continue to be in that holding pattern based on our status as lien holder in the mortgage. I wanted to next move to Blake Road if there's no questions on that, and you can certainly follow up with me offline if there are as well. In Blake Road, in September, you received a schematic design briefing from staff. And one of the points of feedback amongst the other rich comments that we got back on the board's perspective about the design was around the significance of engaging the city of Hopkins's council. And we've had that conversation with city staff. We talked about whether that would be best achieved through council liaisons or to the full council. And staff have asked that we present the schematic design to the city council on October 12th. They were originally thinking the 19th, but it works better for their schedule to do it Tuesday of next week. So Mike, Gabe, and I are working on pulling that together, and we'll be attending the council meeting to give the city council a full update on where our project stands. On the development side, we have received finally some red lines on the preliminary development agreement from Alatus. I think the board's aware because we've talked about it every meeting. In terms of the original schedule that was set out for PDA to purchase agreement, it's not exactly on pace. Other things have happened. The EAW has been submitted to EQB. They've been working on design refinements, and they're preparing to submit through the city's PUD process, and the TIF district's been established. So progress has been made, but on the agreement front, I don't think that we're really on pace. We've spoken with the city about developing a clear, more focused project management framework to clearly outline what the critical issues are and making sure this project's successful on the development front and how those issues need to move in parallel. And then wanting to bring a very focused rhythm and accountability to that work on a weekly basis so that the Watershed Districts project isn't too far out in front of the development. And so those conversations are ongoing. We had one as recently as yesterday. No questions on 325 Blake Road. Move downstream into the city of Edina, the 54th Street stream bank. If you'll remember, we had a discussion based on a presentation from policy planning staff on September 9th around the erosion, stream bank erosion, just south of 54th Street, just south of Arden Park. And at that time, the board was interested in staff going off and engaging the city based on the results of the technical analysis about how we might limit our cost share in the project while also managing and maintaining the relationships and expectations of our partners like the city and of course the property owners. I can briefly report that in some of the discussions with the city engineering staff have taken the initial position that stabilizing the single family properties isn't really a service that the city is accustomed to providing, but they have seen other watersheds do that type of work or provide that service like 9 Mile. We've framed for the city that we're also operating at a regional scale, generally above that of municipalities with a pretty focused set of staff and unlimited budget. And we aren't best positioned to support residential improvements either, with having 120 lakes and some 3 million odd feet of shoreline in the district. Doing that work at a residential scale doesn't really scale for us. But we did say our board had asked us to speak with the city, knowing that we're cognizant of the partnership capital with Edina on Arden Park and the Reach 14 improvements downstream. And so while we see the stream bank issue as separate and discrete, there was some willingness to consider a level of support if the city was interested and the residents were interested in jointly investing. So the city seemed to appreciate that approach. They've taken a lead role in arranging for a small meeting with residents on October 19th that we'll be attending. It seems like they're most interested to provide project management support at this point. They're not readily committing capital, but we'll see what happens with the meeting with the residents. I think following that meeting, we'll loop back to the city managers, to others at the city, as well as I think to President White, Manager Miller, and Manager Sando as something of informal board liaisons to closing this issue out before we return to the board with an actual solution. So that's the status of those conversations, and we'll be meeting with some of the interested residents on October 19th. That's not next week. And then the last item pertains to a potential waiver of conflict of interest for a district engineer, Stantec, on a project in Victoria. The city of Victoria has reached out because they're going to be issuing a request for proposals for a 1,000-foot section of improvement to Steiger Lake Lane. This is just west of downtown, coming out of downtown and connecting with Highway 5. And they're just really looking to match the section of road that's already being improved through the center of downtown. This road connects to 13 acres of publicly held land that is positioned for development. The city's actively marketing for a development partner and engaged in development conversations. That's going to have a regional stormwater component. It's all at sort of the western edge of this road. So I've looked at this, and there's generally minimal water resource opportunities with that development. It's not on the main stem of the creek, drains to Steiger, which is in pretty good shape. This road project poses minimal risk from a permitting perspective. There's no major alignment shift. There's no wetland issues. They will require stormwater, but it looks fairly straightforward. I think the reason the city's interested in working with Stantec and the reason they reached out is they'd use Stantec to do preliminary infrastructure feasibility work on this 13 acres and around this road before Stantec acquired Wenck. So Stantec's sitting on a bunch of survey data and pre-project data, and the city is very much interested in seeing a proposal from Stantec, since it's probably going to be, they think it could be cost effective for them. So per our contract with our engineering firm Stantec, I'm able as the administrator to waive the conflict of interest, but have agreed to give the board points of information when we're considering doing that. Tonight, unless I hear obligations, I would intend to allow Stantec to submit a proposal. Just given the relational capital we have with the city, the minimal risk, and the potential tie into some really important land use decisions that the city's trying to make that are a priority for them. And so I'll see if there's questions or issues there. I'm sorry, Manager Miller.
I don't have any questions. Do you want a motion by the board to regarding the potential conflict, waiving any objections?
We don't need one. The extra clarity never hurts. And with Chris wanting to submit a proposal and Victoria wanting one, I think that could be helpful.
Okay, I'll so move.
Second, Olson.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion before we vote? So voting
Does
on the
Lewis have-
motion, go ahead.
Does Lewis have any concerns?
Madam President, Manager Maxwell, no.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. So voting on the motion to, agree.
Just a point of order,
yes,
if I could. Just by way of policy, if the attorney did have an objection, he would voice it, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes. Madam
Okay,
President.
so
Yes.
as our council, you would, if you saw a problem, you would call the problem out rather than we have to ask you your opinion. Is that correct?
Yeah, but I don't think it's a bad practice to ask me.
No,
I-
but I just wanted to make sure that you would do that if you did see a problem.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Motion to agree that the administrator should waive the conflict of interest for this project in Victoria. How do you vote, Manager Hejmati,
Aye.
Loftus,
Aye.
Maxwell,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Olson?
Aye.
Sando?
Aye.
And White votes aye. Thank you.
Can I just make a comment?
Go right ahead.
It wasn't, Manager Maxwell asked a good question. I just want to make sure that we all felt comfortable with the fact that if the attorney ever did see a problem, he would speak out without being asked. Okay,
I think we've seen that before too, but it never hurts to ask, does it? Good question. Mr. Meehan, did you want to add anything? We've already voted, but did you want to add anything at all?
No, I just appreciate the board considering it and the understanding, I bringing it before the board just to make sure that we're essentially clear on the understanding of the project. So there's not something on the back end that creates concerns. So appreciate the
Okay.
consideration.
Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Whisker.
That concludes the admin report this evening, President White. And I've known Louis a while now, and he's never shy if he sees a problem, so.
All right. It's good to see you all. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good night, everyone.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Ian, before
Thank
you,
you. Good
Enjoy the
night.
rest of the evening. in
Uh,
fact.
What?
Enjoy the rest of the evening. We have some.
you dodged a black bear today in your backyard, right?
Right, so I was right about 20 feet away from my back deck, eating acorns like there was no tomorrow. He'd stand up for a while, and then all of a sudden he'd just lay down for a while and eat some more acorns. And he was a big one too. He probably about 500 pounds.
Oh,
I didn't want to go out and start. I didn't want to go out and start my grill.
Yeah, you took the picture from behind the grill, and he had texted me that he wasn't sure if he was going to make the meeting. And I thought you should get inside because that grill wasn't offering much protection. He decided to make a move.
No, I was in the house taking the picture through
Oh,
the
you
glass
were.
door.
It looked so close. You were so close.
Oh, he was close, and then he got even closer. He got close to the cars. Then he went around the other side of the house and under yeah. So, yeah, and my neighbor wouldn't come over and start the grill either for me. I called him and said, come on over and start my grill. He said,
I'm glad you're safe.
yes. Yeah, I'm not gonna, I'm glad I'm not sitting up by the fire pit.
Crazy.
Take
Good
care,
night.
everybody. It's good to see everyone.
Yeah,
Thanks.
good night, everyone.
Have a good night.
Thanks, James.
Thank you, Steve.